Welcome to Where It's At, an irregular program about internet communications. In this episode we interview Jon Pelson, author of Wireless Wars. Jon Pelson joined Lucent Technologies during the telecom boom of the 90s, helping create and market some of the company's breakthrough technology solutions. He later served as the Chief of Convergence Strategy for British Telecom, developing a global wireless plan as part of 21CN. During his time with these and other telecom companies, he traveled to China and saw that country's fledgling telecommunications companies grow and eventually seize the world lead. Jon's personal experience and rare access to the people who ran the world's largest telecom companies makes it clear that China does not see telecommunications as a market but a strategic asset. After all, 5G technology is based on the same physics as the US Star Wars and Israel's Iron Dome. Carl discusses with Jon how the lead was lost to the Chinese and what we could do to take it back.
Amazing. Let me tell you where I got out of it.
Sure.
Okay. I got out of it that the way China works is entirely different than anything we're used to. And we have to think totally differently about China. And the fact that, as a friend in China says to me, we are a government-driven company or a government-driven society, not a market-driven society. China basically makes it so that it's not about, how companies can work for China. It's how China is going to use companies to progress itself. So can you kind of talk to me about, let's go for the early history in your first couple of chapters where you're talking about, how America came into China and after Nixon, how did telecom start coming in and how do we start building technology there?
Yeah, when the first companies came into China, they were drawn by two things. They were looking for the cheap manufacturing at the time. They were not looking for cheap R&D because there was no competence there. And they were looking for the potential market. And at the start, early 80s, Deng Xiaoping had really just started to liberalize the economy. There wasn't much money, consumer spending, and there was not much, they really could not make anything. I talk about how Philips was in country trying to get them to make a coffee pot, and it wasn't going well. But as telecom boom took off and China realized that getting a deployed telephone network in country was going to be a key to economic growth, the Western companies, and I shouldn't just say Western, companies from Japan at the time, not so much Korea yet, started coming in country. And what China was very clever about is telling these companies, you can set up here, and this especially was through the 90s, but you're going to have to share technology with us. We want to see how you're doing it. And if you want to be able to sell into our market, these are the rules you're going to have to follow. Now, nobody wanted to do that. The guys at Lucent, AT&T, the guys at Ericsson, no one wanted to share their technology. But to a person, every one of them said, we were not worried about them ever actually being a competitive threat to us. I mean, Bell Labs was not worried about a place that couldn't make a coffee pot, not for generations being able to match what they were doing in the world's greatest labs. As it turns out, the transfer of technology led to an incredibly fast ramp up in China's ability to make good, if not great, and very cheap telecom equipment. And that's really how they got their start. Now you had some state-owned companies, Great Dragon in China, state-owned, state-managed. Most people have never heard of them because they were state-owned and state-managed. No sense of innovation, no sense of competitive energy. But companies like Huawei, Ren Zhengfei founded it. He was not a senior officer in the military. He was just a guy who had worked there like so many other people. But he was and is a really effective, competent manager. And he decided we were not simply going to build someone else's product for them. We're going to create our own products. Now, he created the products with access to the technology from the other companies. I found out that the first product that Huawei was making, they had been importing fire alarms from Hong Kong. That's where they got their start. In the 90s, they started selling a PBX switch, and it was from Mitel. So that was kind of the answer to one of those mysteries. And all of a sudden, Mitel found they weren't buying so many of their switches to sell into the mainland, but there were those switches still being sold in the mainland. What they realized is that they were ripping off the Mitel switch, rebranding it as Huawei and selling it onward, as was described to me. What Mitel decided is, rather than fight them, let's join them. We'll sell them the chipsets and we'll at least make some money. And that's how really Huawei got its start. I spoke to people from Lucent who talked about looking at the 5E switch, the flagship of the American telecom network, $1 million switch. And they were shown it at the time the president of the switching division was in, I think it was Beijing, and he was shown the Huawei switch side by side with the Lucent switch, and he realized they were identical, down to the color of the wire. The drill pattern for ventilation holes on the side of it were matched exactly. And in fact, the people from Huawei were very proud. They were pointing, look, we got it just right, didn't we? So how do you compete with this? If you have someone who's taken your tech and the government is backing them to enormous levels, people say, well, government backs US companies. Cisco, over a time period, got $40 to $50 million in government aid, tax breaks and other help. During the same time, the Wall Street Journal found that Huawei got $75 billion in government aid. This is about a 15-year period. If you're competing with a company that can run a $5 billion loss for 15 years without having to really eat any of that loss, the prices are going to be lower, their R&D is going to be higher, and that's exactly what you found. So how do you beat that? Is it hopeless for American companies? What I found in the book, in Wireless Wars, I found a path that would allow America to use a uniquely American superpower, unique American strength. And there's other free countries that have this, but it seems to have been concentrated, at least in recent years, in American ventures. And that's what is referred to as permissionless innovation. So this is just this idea that companies are not waiting for the government to tell them what to do or even to approve it. And in fact, what they'll do is things that the government wants to stop, and they're going to have to overcome resistance. An example is Uber, Airbnb, even Amazon. Amazon said, we're not paying taxes because we're not operating out of your state. Government fought these companies, it sued them, it enjoined them from operating, and they faced the government in court and they won. And this has created trillions of dollars of value. You know, Uber, the idea that a non-licensed taxi driver could pick up a stranger on the street, that was violating laws, it was violating social norms. This happens in this country. It does not happen in China. And this became really one of the centerpieces for how I saw the American response to China's dominance in telecom equipment. And, you know, I talk in the book about a concept of American exceptionalism. My publisher was concerned about it. And I said, no, look, all the examples of American exceptionalism were not born in the US. These are Frenchmen, British people, they're from India. What makes them exceptional is they've got a system here that is not going to squash them for doing things that aren't really approved of. And it's not guaranteed to continue, but it's really a characteristic of free societies. And when it comes to telecom, what this means is you're going to have to break open the kind of the hegemony, the closed system that has left really only 3 companies competing, and open it up so that anyone that's got an idea for a network feature, network software, network hardware, network built-in application can enter the game and sell their product in the market, which has never been the case. You know, with 4G, everything that happened was going over the top. So you built this great broadband network and you would do Zoom over the top. That was an outside application. You could do Uber, you could do these things. 5G, the beauty, the power of 5G is from the aspects that are part of the network, applications that are built in, which means you have to crack that open to get that same innovation. Otherwise, you're going to have 3 companies, 3 really competent companies that are building all the apps. And that is not a recipe for success or innovation. And it also is going to lead to dominance by really 1 or 2 Chinese companies.
So another friend of ours was talking about the fact that, well, we were scared to death of Japan, and everyone was looking at Koretsus and thinking we wanted to basically have, huge amalgamations go on. And we've seen kind of companies acquire ecosystems around themselves. And then in some cases, we see them now splitting apart. Is the answer going to be independent of standards? Is 5G a problem for us, and we should be looking for more of the LoRa types or the Zigbee Alliance types, or the companies that basically are kind of independent of standards bodies and going off on their own? Is proprietary better for us in the long run?
Yeah. So in my view, to go to a true open source model, I don't think is going to be a successful one. It might be, and there's going to be a role that it plays. For sure, there'll be an important role for open source, open architecture, where you don't really even own the IP in what you're delivering. I think it's more the open interface is going to be what's so important. And you look at just a simple telecom example, your USB plug for your Samsung phone costs a few dollars. Your Lightning plug for your iPhone can cost $20 or $30 or $40 because it's a proprietary interface. Anyone can make the USB plug. They're as cheap as the manufacturing cost plus 5%, 10% margin. But there's a unique ownership of Lightning. If you crack open that interface, you get more products, more innovation, and people can build. Maybe a better example is Bluetooth headphones. The interface is open. Anyone can make a product to the Bluetooth standard. So you've got a standard, but it allows open competition, which is why you can buy $5 Bluetooth headphones or $500 Bose headphones. Whatever you want, there's someone innovating a solution for it. I think that argues for an open RAN approach. It's not the only answer to this, but I think to the extent that you can open that, what in 5G is the CPRI interface between the antenna and the radio, between the radio and the base unit, when that opens up and when the software gets decoupled from the hardware, suddenly you've got this wild west of innovation being unleashed. And instead of being a 3-year program at Nokia to develop a new 5G feature, some junior at Caltech in his dorm room can write a network application, not over the top, something that actually gets bought by Verizon and plugged into their network to enable features that people want. That's going to be the key, is that anyone can play, whether it's that Caltech junior or Dell or HP Enterprise or Fujitsu or Samsung. You want to open it up and turn loose all that capital and all that innovation. You got to look at the sales channel. This is not all just about technology. Nokia may have a fantastic CBRS solution or private network solution, but if they got to be selling it to Johnson & Johnson, and if they have to sell it to all the ports up and down the coast, they don't have a sales force for it. They don't have a corporate structure to do that. Right now, they're used to selling to, you can count on your hands the number of major customers that they sell to. So if you add another 15,000, that's a problem. Companies like Dell, companies like Oracle, IBM, they're a lot better at that. Now, if you think that's going to light a fire, I think it will. These companies should be excited if Dell can compete in selling private networks. But if you really want to light a fire under them, tell them that Amazon can reach that customer and not use a Dell server to do it. This is going to get some highly motivated companies. I thought UPS is such a fantastic company. When Amazon said they were going to build their own distribution system, I thought they were crazy, because how do you beat this finely honed machine with great use of technology, great capital, long knowledge in the business? And now with Amazon, I'll be looking on their website and say, if you order this in the next 3 hours, you'll get it today. Like, well, it's 11 o'clock. It's 8 o'clock at night. So if I order by 11, I'll have it by 12. That should put the fear of God into any complacent company that thinks, well, now we're going to be the ones that sell the hardware. They can be disintermediated too. This is exactly what we want, though, isn't it? So you get companies in cloud expertise, you get companies with hardware and software, all turned loose, and no one guaranteed that they'll be the new giant in the market.
So then what's the role for government in this competitive marketplace? Is there a role? Is it just, get out of the way, or is it, throw some money at some R&D? What's the right answer?
Yeah, my first when I first wrote that part of the book, that's exactly what I said. Government needs to just get out of the way. But as I really thought more about it and mapped out how this would work, they need to get out of the way in certain places. They have to stop thwarting innovation, but they also have to they have to help tear down some barriers. And that's a government proactive stance. If you leave the standards committees on their own, it won't necessarily open things up the way the government wants to for the good of the country and really for the good of the broader industry. But government also needs to be helping get some companies over the hurdle. Really, smaller companies don't have the ability to do the security development work that you need. And I think you could even argue that the bigger companies aren't where they need to be there either. So I would argue that one of the roles the government should play is perhaps through the national labs, Idaho National Labs, Sandia, other places. They have better resources and better budgets than some of the giants, even when it comes to just security research and development. I don't think they should be building products. I don't think the government should be picking winners, even as broadly as to say the government's going to be all in on Open RAN. I think it's a pretty compelling story to be made, but that closes the door on whether there was something, as you're suggesting, different that could be where the answer really lies. So the government's got to keep a light touch on picking who the winners are going to be, but they've got to enable entry to companies that don't have the threshold to, can't cross the threshold to do that.
So telling people how not to think is not our goal here. Telling people what to think is not our goal here, but telling people to think is our goal here. And I think this is a great book to help think about what the future is and what the history's been and what we got to think about for the future. So, John, I thank you for the time.
I appreciate the chance to talk with you about this, Carl, and look forward to speaking with you again soon.